Welcome to Spreadsheet Geek. In this video, we're going to focus on getting started with an Excel power map, and we're going to focus on ensuring that all of our data appears on the map in the right location, a topic often omitted or just glossed over by other Excel tutorials. This video was made using Microsoft Excel 2019. Excel Power Maps was first made available with Excel 2013, but only as an add-in that you had to go find, download, and then activate. Power Maps was pre-installed in Excel 2016, but still required users to activate the tool. If you're using a version of Excel within Office 365, Power Maps is always available and always turned on. The reason it's structured as an add-in in the other versions is to conserve memory. If you're not going to use it, it's probably better to leave it turned off, as it might speed up your Excel processing time a bit. To activate Power Maps, go to the Insert menu and look for 3D Map. Now, don't be confused with Map Charts over here. This is a feature of Excel that does not require activation, but the one you want is 3D Map. I wish this said Power Map instead. That would be less confusing. And it's more than just 3D maps, as we'll see. It's also 2D maps, which can be just as effective, if not more. So let's go ahead and click on that and say Open 3D Maps. You may get a prompt like this, which asks you if you want to enable the data analysis add-ins, which includes Power Map. And so you're activating some other things besides Power Map, but go ahead and say yes to that. This will probably take several seconds to crunch its way to activation. And what you'll notice there is that you get a second window popping up with what looks like a Bing map on it, if you're familiar with Bing Maps. And then you have this little window that or object that pops up notifying you about 3D map tours. If you want to see what you activated, go to the File menu, down to the Options, and you can select Add-ins right here, and you'll see that your active application add-ins includes this one right here, Microsoft Power Map. You also activated these other two add-ins down here. And please note, these are COM add-ins rather than Excel add-ins. So if you ever want to deactivate these add-ins, go to your pull-down menu here and select COM add-ins, and you want to manage those. And you just uncheck the three of them right there and say OK. I'm not going to do that right now because we're going to get started looking at a power map. Let's get started putting some locations on a map. What I have here is a new workbook I just opened. It's got 4 worksheets, one for Canada, the UK, Australia, and the United States. And on each are 500 fake addresses for locations within those countries. I want to show some of the pitfalls of putting these things on the map. And please realize this is all fake names, fake companies, and the street addresses are fake as well. This is a YouTube presentation, so I can't use real data. But the cities, the provinces, the states, and the postal codes are all legitimate. If you have actual street level data, Bing Maps inside Power Maps can absolutely resolve that. But for this presentation, we're only going down to the postal code. Let's get started with Canada. You don't have to do anything in particular or highlight any cells whatsoever. Just have the worksheet up that you want to plot on the map. And by the way, my goal is to plot each of these countries as a different layer on the same map, which is referred to as a tour. So let's open 3D Maps. So this is what opens up when you first get in there. We've got some different panes on our view menu here. Over here on the left is the tour pane. You can actually be working on multiple different tour panes, much like you would be working on different PowerPoint presentations at the same time. I don't find this very useful and it takes up a lot of real estate, so I'm going to deactivate that. And here you have your field list. Your field list names right here come directly from your column headers across the top of your data. And what Power Map does with the help of Bing Maps is look at these, look at the data underneath each one of them, and try to resolve that as a location. Now, it's interesting. It has chosen 3 in this case, our address, city, and province. For some reason, Power Map did not select the postal code as a location, even though these would seem to be rather unique Canadian postal codes that are not used anywhere else in the world. But for whatever reason, Bing Maps rejected those. So the idea is if you want to drag some of these over, you just pick them up and drag them over here. Let's put the postal code in there just for the heck of it. So now that I've dragged my postal code over here, everything went kind of muted. And this is a key learning point for this video. When you put something over here, check this second column. So these are your column headers. This is what Power Map refers to that as. So we call it address, they call it street. City is city. Postal, the word postal here that we use needs to be matched up with something, and Power Map couldn't decide what that is. So we have to manually go down here and select postal code. And now I can actually select that. The other thing you should recognize is that some of these parameters have an impact on others. So remember those street addresses, those are all fake. They're not real places. So it put a lot of them in the United States, probably because there's a street of that name in that state. But these should all be in Canada. If I take out street address, now all of a sudden everything's in Canada all the time, including when I select the postal codes. So that is more of a function of this phony data that I'm using rather than Power Map not being able to resolve a location, because these are fake. I should probably delete these and just go with the city, province, and postal code, but I'm going to leave those in there for now. One thing I'd like to point out is this confidence number right here. It's 98% in our case. If you click on that, you get some feedback on 5 postal codes out of however many we have. I don't know if we have actually 500 unique postal codes or if there's duplicates on that list, but there are 5 postal codes on the list that Power Map could not find a location for. That could be errors in my fake data where they just used the wrong postal code. That could very well be the case. Maybe these postal codes aren't used anymore by Canada. That could also be the case. But there is a slight problem there with 5 of those postal codes. Another thing you should notice, and this is kind of subtle, but when you set up a range here like this, these are your column headers back on your original table of data, but notice the order they're in here: first name, last name, company name, address. What Power Maps does is put them in alphabetical order over here. I don't know why it does that, but it can make identifying your range difficult when you see it in a different order. One little tip may be to use column headers that incorporate something that will cue you into what range you're talking about. So I'm eventually going to have a range for each one of my countries and have to scroll down through them to find the right one. and it can be a bit of a challenge to match those up. Unfortunately, at this point with Power Maps, there is no option to rename this. It's just going to be range, and the next one will be range 1, followed by range 2. So that's what we're kind of stuck with in the current version of Power Maps. One other thing worth mentioning is that once you create a layer, you can collapse everything into it like that. Not only can you rename the layer or delete the layer, you can make it visible or invisible. So this is a nice way to put a presentation together if you want to introduce one region, state, or country at a time during a presentation. You can layer them in and build a picture or bring them up one at a time onto the stage. So now the time has come to put our second country, the UK, and map those locations. I didn't discuss this earlier, but when we first went into Power Maps on the Canada data, when I hit that Open 3D Maps, this data was automatically selected, and it was basically fed into what's called the data model. Now, if you have data on other sheets like we do, you'll notice this data is not selected for the UK, Australia, and the United States. That data was not fed in, so we need to put it in there. You can go Control A and select it all, or you can just click on any cell within this field, go up to Power Maps, and rather than say Open 3D Maps, which is open already, we want to add the selected data to 3D Maps, and it will select that range of data and create a new range called Range 1. I kind of wish this was range 1 and this was range 2. That would be less confusing, but it doesn't do that. The other thing it did was create layer 2. So layer 2 is married to range 1. I really like them to fix that. You can rename these, and we'll rename this one United Kingdom. Obviously, we've got some orange dots over here in the US as well as where they're supposed to be. And that's, again, that's a result of my phony street addresses. Obviously, Bing Maps is trying to put some of these in the United States because they're fake. So we're going to disregard the street addresses in the UK, and we'll focus on the postal code because that's basically the smallest, most precise measure of location we have. Let's see what they chose. They chose address, city, and county. Let's bring postal code over here. And remember, we always have to make sure there's something Bing Maps will recognize there. I'm going to just get rid of street address. And that hopefully will bring all the dots in. Let's go to postal code. And I'm going to talk about a lot of these format options in a follow-on video. This video is just about getting your data on the map. I'm going to resize those a little so it's a little more appropriate and zoom out. Let's see if we've got any orange dots misplaced anywhere around the globe, and it doesn't look like we do. So I'm going to call that one a success. Let's move on to our next country, which is Australia. Same drill. This should give us range 2. We're getting some hits in the United States. Hopefully there's some in Australia. Looks like there are. Well, we'll fix that. I am going to bring my postal code over again. I'm also going to rename this layer. And let's delete street, so Bing Maps isn't going to consider street anymore. And we'll go with postal code. And it looks like, let me resize those a little. It looks like all of the purple dots, well, okay, we've got some purple dots in the United States. So even though we have a city, state, and postal code in Australia, it still thinks a few of them are in the United States. So what do we do with this? Let's take a look at our data. What I'm going to do in this case is kind of a method of last resort, and I'm going to add a country column. If I tell Bing Maps that everything on this list is in Australia, it won't make any mistakes, guaranteed. And if you want to be really proactive, just do this from the beginning. Unfortunately, this is going to cause a problem. When I add this to the data model, we're going to get another range, range 3. So we now have a range on here that we'll never use. In fact, we can delete this. We can delete the layer, but we can never delete the range of data that was added. Once you put something into the data model, I don't know of a way to get it out. So we have layer 4 married to range 3 now, and I'm going to rename this again Australia. Let's get rid of street address. In fact, we will pull over postal code again and select postal code that Bing will recognize. I'm going to go ahead and select that. I'm not a big fan of that color. Again, I'll go over the formatting options in another video, but you can select a color here. I like that purple. And let's resize a little. So, are all the purple dots in Australia? It would appear they are. So that's a good learning point. If you're having trouble resolving your data, put in a broad country code to force it all into the same country. There's only about 200 countries in the world, and Bing Maps will surely recognize all of them. Let's go on to our final country, which is the United States. And I'm going to be a little more proactive on this one. Now I could type United States like I am, or I could type USA. There's a number of different things that Bing Maps will recognize, but we'll go with that and add that data to the 3D Maps data model. We'll bring up our field lists. Looks like it's chose green for the United States. We now have a range 4. We have a layer 4. I'm going to call that United States. Let's do our little formatting things. I guess the green is okay. But we need to make sure all the green dots are in the United States. Let's get rid of street. And the finest option I have here looks like zip code. And that's interesting. In the United States, postal codes are called zip codes, and Bing Maps recognized that, so I don't have to select this manually. Let's get rid of the field list. And that looks pretty good. I'm just going to jump back to Canada real quick and resize. It looks like I forgot to resize my labels there. So we've succeeded at what we set out to do. We've got our 4 sets of country data on the map. I'd just like to mention that on our data sets, these are just locations. And if this was a list of customers, and perhaps you would have another column out here with sales, numerical sales values, for example. And you could associate those with these dots over here, and you can make them different sizes or different heights if you're using a 3D map. And all of that, it will be covered in another lesson or video that I'll do shortly. As always, thanks for visiting Spreadsheet Geek. I hope you found this information informative and useful. Please consider hitting my subscribe button. I'll be doing one video every week for the foreseeable future, and you can pick up tips and learn new things about Excel if you watch my videos. Thanks for visiting Spreadsheet Geek.